Marjorie Taylor Greene says if she was a black person, she would appreciate racist monuments. Here it is.
I don't want our statues taken down in our country. I don't think you remove or erase history. So I do agree those statues shouldn't be taken down. They're part of our history. We should learn from our history. We don't erase it. But that doesn't make me a racist because I say leave the statue up there. If I were black people today and I walked by one of those statues, I would be so proud because I'd say, look how far I have come in this country. Look how far my people have, what they have overcome. And these are good things.
So let me follow the logic here, Congresswoman. If you happen to be a black person, you would have a black perspective, even though you have been a white woman your entire life. You can all of a sudden have an overview that's completely different. And your position is, yes, it would be a thing of honor. You would be proud to look at racist monuments that are symbols of death and oppression. And you would have a sense of pride because you, as a make-believe black woman, would look at these statues and say, look at how far my people have come. Madam, in your own conclusion, you have indicted yourself. Please understand, when you submit that as your proclamation, you are admitting that, in fact, the Confederate statues are racist. Think about what you said. If you happen to be black and you saw these symbols, you would say, look at how far we have come. Come from what? Well, racist people, oppression, bigotry. Yeah, the system of racism. That is what you're referring to. So while making that conclusion, you deny that America has a racist background, has a racist foreground, and a racist current. But you submit that on the record. Now, naturally, there's an elephant in the room. Obviously, this is extreme privilege being operated here. But people want to play the game. If I were black, if I were white, let's do it. Let's go to the divorce dynamic. Now remember, people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and others who think like her, they are still able to claim to be pro-American when they represent anti-American views. They support those who committed treason against the United States of America. They also are for divorcing states from the actual union, the United States of America. Here it is. In a Twitter post on Monday, the same individual, Marjorie Taylor Greene, thinks wokeness is so out of control that red states and blue states need to separate. And according to Greene, everyone she talks to agrees. Now you're looking at the tweet. It says, we need a national divorce. We need to separate by red states and blue states and shrink the federal government. Everyone I talk to say this: from the sick and disgusting woke culture issues shoved down our throats to the Democrats' traitorous America Last policies, we are done. Literally coming from a woman who actually supports known traitors to the United States of America. Coming from a woman who provides cover for known domestic terrorists in the United States of America. She still gets to adopt an ideology and a narrative that considers her to be pro-American. She will still be able to be called a patriot, fundraise around this nation. Madam, states are already divided. It's called a state line. The federal government, well, the federal government is empowered by the US Constitution, something I thought you actually liked, but obviously not. And let's be very clear about what Marjorie Taylor Greene is doing. She's trying to get a job. Yes, this is all about her interview to become vice president of the United States by way of Donald Trump picking her to run next to him. Congratulations, Marjorie Taylor Greene. I consider you, after your last racist stunt, to be in the front running now. Way to go. All right, this is not the first time Greene has called for a national divorce. Last year, in response to someone complaining about West Coast people transplanting themselves in red states, Greene agreed that policies such as not allowing transplants from blue states to vote are possible in a national divorce scenario. After Democrat voters and big donors ruin a state like California, you would think it wise to stop them from doing it to another great state like Florida, she said. Now, once again, the backdrop of the US Constitution. It is unconstitutional to stop someone from traveling over state lines as long as they legally are able to do so, barring some criminal penalty or parole status. So remember, commerce travel, the right to commerce, the right to interstate travel, the right to engage in business across state lines is codified as a right in the US Constitution. Once again, Marjorie Taylor Greene representing a position antithetical to the same document she proclaims is so great. She will remain known as a patriot and pro-American to those who support her. There's more. And in 2021, Greene conducted a highly unscientific poll via Twitter to gauge people's interest in splitting the nation along party lines. She claimed it found 48% of the country wanted it to stay together, while 43% wanted it to split, and 9% were undecided. Now let me help you understand what's happening. She's not coming up with these things on her own. She is being told, let's push this narrative. Let's see how it sticks. Look for this narrative to become a bigger dynamic in the upcoming presidential cycle. All right, Ben, thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, there's three directions I could go here, but the first direction I think is the most obvious, which is like, we started with Marjorie Taylor Greene talking about Confederate monuments and just like the sheer absurdity surrounding that. But also now she's saying, wait, let's do it again. So like, hold up, like, do you think that people in the United States should be so happy with all the progress we've made? Or do you want to rewind back to when we had the Civil War? Which really ties into the way that the people who did January 6th were treated and the United States like historical failure to ever fully deal with white supremacists. And I think the way we inappropriately dealt with the end of the Civil War. Usually when you have a civil war and one side loses, you'll have like the generals and the people who led the whole Civil War movement, all those things, like go to jail or like lose their property and things like that. Well, unfortunately in the United States, a lot of those people kept all their positions of power, kept all of their wealth, and used it to continue the exploitative systems, only with like slightly different mechanisms of action, right? Like we have to remember that for a lot of people, slavery just turned into being wrongfully imprisoned by the state and then rented back to the literal same plantation owners. So like, you know, like this is a reality that's been existing in the United States for a long time, where every time supposedly we've dealt with some sort of extreme inequality, there seems to be some new system to maintain it in a more subtle or obscured way. And following on top of that, I mean, like, I guess it's just kind of like silly that these Republicans like push this idea of like breaking up the country, because like not only would like a solely Republican country struggle on the international stage to be taken seriously in any way or like shape or form, but also like their economies are fundamentally different in a lot of different ways, and they wouldn't be able to sustain themselves. If you look economically, like red states would not be able to sustain themselves without like the income and the revenue that comes from blue states. Which have more like technology sector workers and infrastructure and stuff like that. So like that in and of itself is just really silly. But like it just speaks to the shamelessness. Like with the first thing that Marjorie Taylor Greene said that we covered, it speaks to this reality that Republicans quite literally lack the theory of mind. They struggle with a concept that people might have different experiences and understandings of the world than they do. Like it's just this main character syndrome that drives people to think that they're the only person in the world that matters. And how could anybody else in the world possibly have a different perspective than I do? And failing to see like how their actions impact other people And it's something that's very widespread within the Republican Party at large. And I think it explains a lot of their politics, where quite literally their politics is just centered around what is personally convenient for them and not even rooted in any sort of coherent ideology or belief system. That's why they are so capable of having these like ridiculous conspiracy theories like all spinning around their head at the same time, even when they're like self-contradictory, right? Is Donald Trump secretly the president, or did Joe Biden steal the election, right? One of these, like both of those things can't literally be true, right? But it doesn't matter to them because in their mind, they're the only real person that exists. And thus their actions in their mind should have no consequence in the world. But unfortunately for Marjorie Taylor Greene and for every other Republican out there, we do live in a shared reality where we have many different people with different thoughts, feelings, and beliefs. And most people believe that people like Marjorie Taylor Greene are intolerable.
Very well said, very well said. And I will add this one point. States are not fixed, red, blue. What happens to purple? Those transitioning. These are people. Ideology is not the same as a policy dynamic. Your partisanship should not determine if a state is able to remain connected to America. It's insane.